Hi, boys and girls. We're going to read Adoniram Judson again. We're on chapter 7, The Caravan. Goodbye, Anne. Goodbye, Adoniram, the friends shouted from the dock as the newly married Mr. and Mrs. Judson boarded the caravan. They had been married for only 2 weeks, and they were going to India, way across the world, boys and girls. Anne stood at the rail and waved happily. She had her friend, Harriet Newell, who stood beside her. Harriet had married Samuel Newell a short time ago. "We have pretty wives," Adoniram said to Samuel. "Yes, we do," Samuel said, "and we shall all grow old together in India." The 4 of them laughed together. Then they went to join the captain at his table for dinner. This is what the caravan looked like, the ship. Kind of reminds you of the Mayflower, doesn't it? With all the sails. Remember, I told you all the pictures are not color, they're black and white. When they looked out the next morning, they could see nothing but miles of water in every direction. Waves splashed against the sides of the boat and splashed salt spray in their faces and hair. "Here we go," Adoniram cried. "What a great adventure." For 4 months, the caravan sailed across the ocean. So 4 months. That would be like from when we came back from Christmas, in January, till about now. That would be about 4 months. There were storms and choppy seas, and they got sick. Then they got better. Then they got sick again. I probably would get motion sickness or car sick and be throwing up. And I think that's what was happening to some of the people. "We'll trust God through everything," Adoniram told Anne. "God protected me in the French prison, and he will take care of us on this journey." "We'll have a nice little house in India soon," Anne said, "and everything will be perfect." "I have heard good things about India," Harriet said. "It is ruled by the English. Samuel and I heard about a country that was close to India that's ruled by a cruel king." Means mean, that he would hurt them, that kind of king. "Yes," said Samuel, "Burma. The king there kills people for no reason at all." Scary. Anne shivered. "Let's be glad we are not going there." The caravan rounded the coast of Africa, leaving the Atlantic Ocean. You ought to look at that in your history book and find where Africa is, and going down below it and coming up into the Indian Ocean. "The Indian Ocean is named for India," Adoniram said. "We must almost be home." "Home," said Anne. She grabbed her friend Harriet's hand and smiled. "It will be nice to be on ground again, won't it, Harriet?" "Oh, yes," Harriet said. "I do not feel so well. I will feel much better when I can walk on ground that doesn't move." At last the day came. "There's India!" The captain said to the 4 missionaries, "and I think I see someone there to meet you." It was the great missionary William Carey, who was on the dock. "Everything will be fine now," said Adoniram. But everything was not fine. Soon after they had settled into the mission house, a government official arrived. He wore a fancy coat and carried a sword. "You must leave India at once," the man said. "We want no more missionaries here." Adoniram jumped to his feet. "What do you mean?" he said. "England rules India. Surely England wants India reached for Jesus Christ." The government man cleared his throat. "My dear young man," he said, "India is ruled by the East India Company. The company does not want the natives to become Christians. If they do, there might be trouble between those who become Christians and those who are not. He straightened up, put his hand on his sword. We do not want any trouble now, do we? Adoniram looked around the room. The other missionaries stared back at him, their eyes wide open. Think of the trouble that will come to the people of India if they do not hear the Gospels. The Gospel, he said. The man in the fancy coat shook his head. You cannot stay here. Go back to America where you belong. Please excuse us, sir, Adoniram said. My friends and I need to pray. Adoniram and Anne and Samuel and Harriet knelt together on the floor. They clasped hands together and prayed fervently. Dear Father, Samuel prayed, we have come so far to preach Jesus Christ. Please help us find a place where we can serve you. Adoniram spoke first. May we settle on the island of Mauritius? Mauritius? It's a little hard to pronounce. Yes, said the government man. That is a good idea. A ship is going there, but there is room for only 2 passengers. The other 2 must stay behind until another ship comes. Samuel pulled Adoniram aside and spoke to him quietly. Adoniram nodded. We will go to Mauritius, Samuel said to the government man. My wife Harriet is ill. She needs to be done with traveling as soon as possible. Anne hugged Harriet goodbye. We will be with you soon, she said to her friend. Then we will work together, build a mission, raise families, and serve the Lord with all of our lives. They waved until the boat was out of sight. Then Anne sighed. That's a sigh. Then she and Adoniram walked back to the mission house. Time passed quickly. Soon Adoniram and Anne boarded another ship bound for Mauritius. I can't wait to see Harriet again, Anne said, as they approached the island coast. They hurried to get their baggage and climbed down the ladder to the dock. There was Samuel waiting for them. His eyes were red, and his face was weary and sad. Where's Harriet? Anne said. She looked up and down. Where's my friend Samuel? And Samuel began to cry. Harriet is dead, he said to Adoniram and Anne. They gathered him into their arms and hugged and cried with him. She loved Jesus and wanted to tell these people all about him. But now she's gone. That afternoon, they visited the cemetery. Adoniram prayed with Samuel. Anne gathered wildflowers and placed them on her grave. Goodbye, my dear friend, she said. Samuel looked up and said, I cannot stay here. Adoniram nodded. Go in peace, my friend. God will give you rest and help. For 4 months, Adoniram and Anne were also ready to leave. I am restless here, Adoniram said. We will spend all our time working with the English soldiers. There are thousands of men who can preach the gospel in English, and very few that can talk to the natives. We must go further east. All I want is a little spot that I can call my own, said Anne. She smiled at her husband, took one last look at this beautiful island, then walked into the house to pack up their things. In a few days, they were back in India. You cannot stay here, said the government official as they descended from the ship to get onto the Indian soil. We know we cannot stay in India. We're waiting for a ship to take us further east. No, the man said. That won't be possible. There is a ship at anchor in the harbor. It is leaving for England tonight. You two will be on that ship. You will go to England, and from here you will go to America." The man stomped away from them, his silver sword shining in the sunlight. Adoniram looked at Anne. "I know God doesn't want us to go back to America yet," said Adoniram. "We must run away from India." "Where will we go?" said Anne. "Anywhere we can. God will show us." Adoniram and Anne rushed down to the harbor. They asked at ship after ship, but everyone was heading to a port controlled by the East India Company. If they boarded any of those ships, they would be sent back to England or America. Hours passed. Anne slumped down onto a wooden bench by a tree. She shaded her eyes with her hand and looked out across the harbor. Suddenly, a small ship caught her attention. "Look, Adoniram, there's a small boat just behind that big ship. Let's ask that captain where he's going." They approached the captain of the Georgiana. "Where are you bound?" Adoniram asked. "Nowhere you nice folks want to go," the captain said. "I'm heading out to hostile territory. And if you know what I mean," he coughed loudly and spit tobacco juice out the side of the ship. "Where?" said Adoniram. "Burma." Anne gasped. Adoniram bit his lip and nodded his head. He turned and looked around the harbor. Every other vessel would take them away from where they believed God wanted them to work. This was the only ship in the whole harbor that was heading toward a land where they could reach heathen people for Christ. "Adoniram," Anne said, pulling on his sleeve, "remember what we heard about the king of Burma? He's cruel. He kills people he doesn't like." "That is true," Adoniram nodded. "But I believe God will take care of us if we do what he wants us to do." He looked deeply into Anne's eyes. "We can go to Burma, or we can go home to America. What does God want us to do?" Anne and Adoniram bowed their heads in prayer. They asked God to show them what to do. When they finished praying, Anne's face was bright and happy. Adoniram's was too. "Captain, do you have room for 2 passengers?" "I do, but the ride will be stormy, and I have no accommodations for you. You must live in a tent on the deck." Adoniram looked at Anne. For a woman accustomed to a comfortable home in New England, perhaps it would be too much to ask her to live in a tent. But Anne smiled and nodded. "With God, nothing is impossible," she said. "Good," said Adoniram. "We shall go to Burma. We shall tell the people there of a Savior, and maybe we will even tell the cruel king." The captain looked over at the 2 young people. "You are crazy," he said, "but I like you. Get on board. We sail in an hour." So they're heading to this land of Burma, where it sounds very dangerous. Will God be able to take care of them? Yes. Yes, he will. Bye, boys and girls.